I paid for this seat. 4 words that made a flight attendant freeze. A billionaire goes silent, and an entire business-class cabin hold its breath. They wanted him gone. A tired, worn-down single father who didn't look like he belonged. They called security. They threatened him. They made him feel like nothing. But what nobody on that plane knew, not the VIP, not the crew, not the 180 passengers settling into their seats, was that the man they were trying to remove owned the very airline stamped on their boarding passes. And in the next 6 hours, Marcus Washington was about to prove that real power doesn't announce itself. It just shows up when it matters most. Drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels. And if you haven't already, subscribe and hit that bell because you don't want to miss what happens next. Marcus Washington hadn't slept in 34 hours. He stood in the boarding line at Gate B7 in JFK Terminal 5, ticket in one hand, phone in the other. The phone screen showed a text from his lawyer, Rachel Morrison. 4 words that had kept him awake through 2 connecting thoughts and a nightmare he couldn't shake. Don't miss this flight. He wouldn't. He couldn't. Because in 48 hours, a judge in London was going to decide whether Marcus's 9-year-old daughter Zoe would stay with him or be relocated permanently to the United Kingdom with her mother. That was the only reason he was here. Not vacation, not business, not some reward he'd given himself after years of grinding. This was survival, the legal kind, the kind where you either show up or you lose everything. He tucked the phone into his jacket pocket and shuffled forward with the line. The woman at the podium scanned his boarding pass and glanced at him for a half-second too long. He noticed. He always noticed. He was used to it. The look people gave when a man like him showed up in the wrong line. Business class, seat 14C. The gate agent's smile tightened just slightly. Her name tag read Linda Torres. 38 years old, maybe 40. Hair pulled back in a bun so tight it looked painful. Her eyes flicked from the boarding pass to Marcus's face, then back to the pass, then to her computer screen. Mr. Washington? Yes. I need to verify your ticket. Marcus pulled his phone back out and opened the confirmation email. Showed her the screen. Booking reference. Seat assignment. Payment confirmation. Linda Torres stared at it longer than necessary. Long enough that the man behind Marcus in line shifted his weight and sighed audibly. Long enough that Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the one that came when he knew what was happening but couldn't prove it yet. Is there a problem? Marcus kept his voice level. No, sir. Just making sure everything matches. She typed something, frowned, typed again. Then she looked up at him with that practice smile flight personnel learn in training. The one that's supposed to make you feel like they're doing you a favor. Do you have another form of ID? Passport, maybe? Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out his passport, handed it over. Linda Torres examined it like she was authenticating a Rembrandt, flipped through pages, held it up to the light. Compared the photo to his face with an intensity that suggested she thought he might be an international fugitive traveling under an alias. The man behind Marcus made a louder sound this time, a throat clear that communicated impatience in the universal language of people who fly business class and expect efficiency. Linda Torres finally handed the passport back. Thank you, Mr. Washington. Enjoy your flight. She said it like a question, like she wasn't entirely sure he should be enjoying anything. Marcus nodded and walked down the jetway. He'd earned that seat, not with a corporate card, not with frequent flyer miles accumulated from work trips someone else paid for, not with some last-minute upgrade because the airline overbooked economy and needed to shuffle bodies around. He'd earned it with 14-hour shifts at the electrical plant. With overtime he'd begged his supervisor to let him take. With weekends he gave up so the money could go somewhere that mattered. $5,400. That's what the ticket cost. Round trip, business class JFK to London Heathrow, because the only available economy seats would have gotten him to London 6 hours after the custody hearing started. And missing it meant a default judgment, meant Jennifer's lawyers would stand in front of Judge Eleanor Hargrove and paint Marcus as the absent father who couldn't even bother to show up, meant Zoe would be on a plane to London within a month, enrolled in a British school, living in a house with Jennifer and her new husband James, a radiologist who made more in 3 months than Marcus made in a year. So Marcus paid. He emptied what was left in his savings after Rachel Morrison's retainer, after the private investigator who documented every school pickup and doctor's appointment, after the child psychologist's evaluation that confirmed Zoe was thriving in Marcus's care. He told himself it was worth it. He told himself Zoe was worth everything he had and everything he'd ever have. She was. He found row 14 and slid into the window seat. The leather was cool against his back. The legroom felt almost absurd compared to the economy seats he usually flew. He leaned his head against the window and closed his eyes just for a moment, just to let the exhaustion wash over him without fighting it. Around him, business class filled up with the kind of people who flew this way all the time. Suits that fit like they were sewn onto bodies. Watches that cost more than Marcus's truck. Cologne that didn't come from a drugstore shelf. They moved with ease like the cabin was an extension of their living rooms. Laptops out before the seatbelt sign even turned on. Phones pressed to ears, closing deals in whispered tones that somehow still managed to project authority. Marcus sat still. He didn't touch the menu card in the seat pocket, didn't adjust the seat controls, didn't flag down the flight attendant for a pre-departure drink. He just sat there and tried to breathe through the weight pressing on his chest. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Rachel Morrison. He opened it with a thumb that felt too heavy. Custody cases like this hinge on showing up. The judge needs to see you're the one fighting. If Jennifer's legal team can argue you didn't prioritize the hearing, it's over. Marcus typed back with one hand. I'm on the plane. I'll be there. Then he put the phone on airplane mode and exhaled slowly through his nose. He thought about Zoe, about the way she laughed when he burned pancakes on Sunday mornings, that bright giggle that started in her belly and bubbled up until her whole body shook. About how she'd started reading chapter books out loud to him at night, not because she needed help with the words anymore, but because she knew he liked listening to her voice. About the drawings she'd taped to the refrigerator last week. 2 stick figures holding hands, one tall, one small, underneath in purple crayon, me and Dad forever. He pressed his palm against his chest and held it there, feeling his heartbeat through the fabric of his shirt. Feeling the ache that lived just beneath his ribs, the one that showed up every time he thought about losing her. He wasn't going to lose her, not today, not ever. The cabin doors hadn't closed yet. People were still boarding, filling the aisles with rolling luggage and the rustle of coats being shoved into overhead bins. Marcus kept his eyes closed and let the sounds wash over him. He was good at this, good at making himself small, good at not taking up space, good at being invisible when visibility meant scrutiny. It was a skill he'd learned young. Growing up in Cleveland in a neighborhood where being noticed by the wrong people meant trouble. Working his way through community college while his friends were either getting locked up or getting out. Landing the job at Midwest Industrial Electric at 22 and realizing that even in a safety vest and steel-toed boots, even with a clipboard and a certification that said he knew what he was doing, some people would always look at him and see someone who didn't belong. So he learned to be quiet, to do the work, to let his competence speak louder than his presence. And it worked, for the most part, until moments like the one at the gate when quiet competence didn't matter because someone had already decided what they were looking at. The memories came without permission. They always did when he was this tired. 6 months ago, sitting in a conference room across from Jennifer and her attorney. Jennifer looked different than he remembered. thinner, her hair shorter, wearing a dress he'd never seen before, navy blue with a pearl necklace that probably came from James. She wouldn't look at him, just stared at the table while her lawyer laid out the case for relocation. Better schools, cultural opportunities, extended family support, a stable two-parent household. All the things Jennifer could provide in London that Marcus supposedly couldn't provide in Ohio. Rachel had countered with facts. Attendance records showing Marcus at every parent-teacher conference. Medical records documenting how Marcus handled Zoe's asthma attacks. Financial statements proving he'd never missed a child support payment, never been late on rent, never let Zoe go without anything she needed. But facts only mattered if the judge believed they outweighed opportunity. And opportunity had a seductive shine to it, especially when it came wrapped in private schools and museum memberships and summers in the English countryside. Marcus opened his eyes. The cabin was almost full now. Across the aisle, a woman in her 50s was settling into 14A, arranging a cashmere wrap over her shoulders like she was preparing for a transatlantic hibernation. 2 rows up, a man in a charcoal suit was already typing on his laptop, fingers moving with the mechanical rhythm of someone who'd written the same email 1,000 times. Marcus pulled his own phone out one more time before the flight attendants started their final checks. Opened his photos, found the one he'd taken 3 days ago. Zoe in the kitchen, flour on her nose, holding up a cookie she'd shaped like a star. She'd been staying with Marcus's mother while he was in New York for the pre-hearing depositions. His mother had sent updates every few hours. Zoe ate all her vegetables. Zoe finished her homework. Zoe asked when Daddy was coming home. He zoomed in on her face. 9 years old, brown eyes that looked just like his, smile that could disarm anyone, hair in 2 braids his mother had done because Marcus still hadn't mastered anything more complicated than a ponytail. She had asthma, moderate, persistent asthma, the pulmonologist called it, diagnosed when she was 5, after a cold turned into something that made her wheeze so hard Marcus thought her ribs might crack. She needed a daily inhaler, a rescue inhaler for emergencies, a nebulizer for bad attacks, and someone who knew the signs, who could tell the difference between normal breathing and the subtle whistle that meant her airways were tightening. Marcus knew those signs. He'd learned them the hard way sitting in an ER at 2 in the morning while Zoe struggled to breathe and Jennifer paced the hallway in tears, unable to do anything but panic. That was when Marcus realized panic didn't help. Action did. Calm did. Knowing exactly what to do and doing it without hesitation. Jennifer never learned that calm. 6 months into the separation, Zoe had an attack while staying overnight with her mother. Jennifer called 911. The paramedics arrived to find Zoe sitting on the couch with her rescue inhaler, breathing normally, wondering why there were sirens. The ER physician's notes said it clearly. Episode managed at home, transport unnecessary. But Jennifer had panicked, and panic when it came to a child's health was a kind of absence, a kind of not being there even when you were standing right next to them. Marcus saved the photo and locked his phone, put it back in his jacket pocket and leaned his head against the window again. Outside, the ground crew was disconnecting the jetway. The sky beyond the terminal was gray, heavy with clouds that looked like they were holding snow they didn't want to release yet. He thought about what Rachel had told him during their last meeting. The judge is going to look at 2 things, stability and presence. Jennifer has the money and the opportunities. You have the track record. You've been there every single day. You've been the constant. That matters, Marcus. That's what wins these cases. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that showing up counted for something in a world that seemed designed to reward people who could pay for shortcuts. But belief required energy he didn't have, so instead he just held on to the facts. He was on the plane. He would land at Heathrow at 6:40 in the morning, local time. He would take the express train into London. He would meet Rachel at her office by 8:30. They would review the documents one more time, and at 10 o'clock, he would walk into that courtroom and look Judge Eleanor Hargrove in the eye and tell her exactly why Zoe belonged with him. Because he was her father, not the one with money, not the one with the bigger house or the impressive job title, just the one who showed up every morning, every night, every time it mattered. The seatbelt sign came on with a soft chime. The captain's voice crackled through the intercom. Standard greeting, weather update, estimated flight time 7 hours and 20 minutes. A smooth ride expected over the Atlantic. Marcus let the words wash over him without really hearing them. He was already doing the math in his head for the 100th time. Landed Heathrow at 6:40, express train by 7. Rachel's office by 8:30 if traffic cooperated. Review documents for 90 minutes. Courtroom by 10. It was tight, but it was doable. As long as nothing went wrong, the aircraft began to push back from the gate. Marcus felt the slight lurch, the change in momentum that meant they were moving. He closed his eyes again and tried to let the exhaustion pull him under just for a few minutes, just enough to take the edge off. That's when she appeared. A flight attendant. Mid-40s, dark hair pulled back in a bun. Name tag read Maureen Caldwell. She walked down the aisle with purpose, scanning seat numbers until her eyes landed on Marcus. She stopped. "Mr. Washington?" Marcus looked up. "Yes." She smiled. It was the kind of smile that had been rehearsed 10,000 times in front of a bathroom mirror. Professional, controlled, empty. "I'm sorry to bother you, sir. We have a small situation. One of our guests has been assigned to this row, and there's been a seating conflict. Would you mind relocating to another seat so we can accommodate him?" Marcus blinked. His brain was moving through mud, trying to process words that didn't make sense in the order they'd been delivered. "Relocating where?" "We have availability in economy. It would just be for this flight. We'd be happy to offer you complimentary miles for the inconvenience." The exhaustion evaporated, just burned off like fog in direct sunlight, leaving behind a clarity that was almost painful. Marcus sat up straighter and looked at Maureen Caldwell with full attention. "You want me to give up my business class seat and move to economy?" "It's just a request, sir. We're trying to resolve a boarding issue as quickly as—" "I paid $5,000 for this seat." She paused. The smile flickered, like a light bulb with a loose connection. "I understand, sir, and we truly appreciate your flexibility, but this particular guest is a priority passenger, and priority how?" She hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. Enough for Marcus to see the calculation happening behind her eyes. Enough to understand that this wasn't about seating conflicts or boarding issues. This was about something else entirely. "He's a valued member of our executive loyalty program, and so he didn't book a seat in business class. But you want to give him mine?" Maureen Caldwell's jaw tightened. The smile was gone now, replaced by something harder, something that looked like impatience wrapped in professional courtesy. "Sir, I'm simply asking if you'd be willing to—" "No." The word sat between them like a wall. Solid, immovable, the kind of word that doesn't leave room for negotiation. She straightened her posture, adjusted the jacket of her uniform. When she spoke again, her voice had lost all pretense of friendliness. "Mr. Washington, I understand this is frustrating, but I'm encouraging you to consider the offer. The miles we're providing are quite generous, and I don't need miles, I need this seat. I have a legal obligation in London tomorrow morning, and I booked this flight specifically because it's the only one that gets me there in time." "I appreciate that, sir, but is there a written policy that says a paying passenger can be moved to accommodate someone else after boarding?" She didn't answer. "Is there?" Marcus repeated. His voice was still calm, still level, but there was iron underneath it now. The kind of iron that came from 22 years of being underestimated and learning exactly when to stop bending. Maureen Caldwell's eyes darted toward the front of the cabin, toward someone Marcus couldn't see yet. "Let me speak with the cabin director. I'll be right back." She turned and walked briskly up the aisle. Marcus watched her go. His heart was hammering now, not from anger but from something deeper, something older, the specific exhaustion that came from having to fight for things other people took for granted. He'd spent his whole life being the guy people looked past, the guy who got talked over in meetings, the guy whose ideas got credited to someone else, the guy who showed up early, stayed late, did the work, and never got thanked because thank you required seeing someone in the first place, and every time he'd done the polite thing. He'd moved, he'd stepped aside, he'd swallowed whatever he was feeling and told himself it didn't matter. But this time it did matter, because Zoe was on the other end of this flight. And if he got bumped to economy, if economy was full and he got bumped to a later departure, if he missed the hearing by even an hour, Jennifer's attorneys would use it. They'd frame it as negligence, as proof that he wasn't committed, as a reason to take his daughter 3,000 miles away, so no. He wasn't moving, not today. 2 minutes passed, then 3, then 5. The cabin had gone quiet in a way that felt deliberate. The other passengers in business class had noticed. Some pretended to read, others glanced sideways, their eyes moving between Marcus and the front of the cabin where Maureen Caldwell had disappeared. A woman across the aisle whispered something to her husband, who shook his head slightly and looked away. Marcus felt their eyes, felt the weight of their assumptions. He knew what they saw, a man in a jacket that had seen better days, hands that were rough from work, not soft from typing, no briefcase, no laptop, no air of authority. They saw someone who didn't belong, and now they were watching to see if he'd be removed. That's when the VIP arrived. He came down the aisle like he owned it, tall, tanned, silver hair styled in a way that suggested a standing appointment with someone who charged $200 for a haircut. Navy blazer, no tie. The kind of man who walked into rooms and expected them to rearrange themselves around him. His name was Victor Sterling, 56 years old. Founder and managing partner of Sterling Capital Ventures, a tech investment firm that had backed 3 companies that later went public and made early investors obscenely wealthy. Forbes had profiled him twice. He had a verified checkmark on every social media platform. He had a reputation for being brilliant, ruthless, and absolutely certain that the world owed him convenience. And right now, the world owed him seat 14A. He stopped at row 14 and looked at Marcus the way you'd look at a coat someone left on your chair. Not with hostility, just with the mild confusion of a man who expected obstacles to remove themselves. "This is my row." He didn't say it to Marcus. He said it to Maureen Caldwell, who had reappeared behind him like a shadow. "Yes, Mr. Sterling, we're working on resolving the situation." "What situation?" Victor Sterling looked at Marcus directly now, taking inventory, the jacket, the hands, the exhaustion written on his face. "Who is this?" Marcus met his gaze and didn't blink. "I'm the person sitting in the seat I paid for." Sterling's expression didn't change. He turned back to Maureen. "I was told this row would be cleared." "We made the request, sir. The passenger has declined." "Declined?" Sterling said the word like it was foreign, like he'd never heard it used in reference to himself. He looked at Marcus again, longer this time, really looking. "Listen, I don't know what your situation is, and I'm sure you're a perfectly fine person, but I fly this route 8 times a year. I have meetings in London that affect thousands of jobs. I need the space, the quiet, and the window, so let's make this easy. Take the upgrade offer, move to the back, and everyone's happy." Marcus looked at him without moving. "Everyone except me." "Come on, man, it's just a seat." "Then take a different one." Victor Sterling's nostrils flared, just slightly, just enough. He turned sharply to Maureen Caldwell. "Get your supervisor." "Mr. Sterling, Now!" Maureen disappeared again. Victor Sterling didn't sit down. He stood in the aisle, arms folded, blocking the path, a silent power move. A way of saying I'm not going anywhere and neither is this problem until it's solved the way I want it solved. Marcus didn't look at him. He looked straight ahead. His hands were steady on the armrests, but his pulse was racing. Not from fear, from the specific kind of adrenaline that came from knowing a fight was coming and not being able to avoid it. A minute later, a new face appeared. Older, more senior. Name tag read Vincent Harlow, cabin director. Probably 50 years old, gray at the temple. The kind of gravitas that came from 20-plus years of managing conflicts at 30,000 feet. Good evening, gentlemen. I understand there's a disagreement about seating. There's no disagreement, Victor Sterling said. His voice had the clipped efficiency of a man used to being obeyed. There's a passenger in a seat that was supposed to be available for me. Fix it. Vincent Harlow looked at Marcus. His eyes did the same assessment everyone else's had done. Quick, efficient, drawing conclusions from surfaces. Sir, I apologize for the confusion. We'd like to offer you a seat in our premium economy section along with a full refund of the fare difference and 10,000 bonus miles. Marcus shook his head slowly. I appreciate that, but I'm not moving. Sir, we're trying to accommodate a valued... Is there a regulation that allows you to forcibly relocate a passenger who has a confirmed paid ticket in their assigned seat? Vincent Harlow hesitated. Because if there is, Marcus continued, and his voice was still calm, still controlled, but there was steel underneath it now. I'd like you to cite it, and I'd like it in writing, and I'd like the names of every crew member involved in this request, because my lawyer is going to want them. The cabin went dead silent. People 3 rows away stopped pretending not to listen. Phones came out, not obviously, just slight movements, hands shifting, screens glowing. Victor Sterling stared at Marcus like he'd just spoken in a language Sterling didn't know existed. You're going to lawyer up over an airplane seat? Marcus turned to face him. When he spoke, his voice was low, deliberate. Every word chosen with precision. Mr. Sterling, I'm flying to London for a custody hearing. My daughter is 9 years old. If I miss that hearing, I could lose her. I worked 14-hour days for 4 months to pay for this ticket. I haven't slept in 34 hours. I haven't eaten since yesterday. And I am not giving up this seat because someone more important than me decided he wanted it. He paused. Let that sit. Let the entire business class cabin hear it. So, with all due respect, sir, find somewhere else to sit. The silence that followed was the loudest thing on the plane. Victor Sterling's face cycled through 3 emotions in rapid succession. Surprise, offense, and then something cold, something that looked like calculation. He leaned down, close enough that Marcus could smell bourbon on his breath. You're making a mistake. I know people at this airline, senior people. You're going to wish you'd taken the deal. Marcus didn't flinch. Maybe, but I'll still have my seat. Sterling straightened up, looked at Vincent Harlow. I want this man removed. Harlow swallowed. The color had drained from his face. He was a man standing between 2 oncoming trains, trying to calculate which one would hurt less. Mr. Sterling, under current regulations, we cannot remove a passenger who has a valid... Then call the captain. Vincent Harlow looked like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. He nodded slowly, turned, walked toward the cockpit at the front of the cabin. Victor Sterling remained standing in the aisle, jaw clenched, radiating the specific kind of fury that comes from a man who has never been told no and has absolutely no idea what to do with it. Around them, 180 passengers sat in charged silence. Some watched openly now, others typed furiously on their phones before the crew could enforce airplane mode. The woman across the aisle had her hand over her mouth. The man in the charcoal suit 2 rows up had stopped typing and turned halfway around in his seat. Marcus sat still, hands on his knees, eyes forward. He thought about Zoe, about the drawing on the refrigerator, about 2 stick figures holding hands. And he waited. 3 minutes later, Vincent Harlow returned from the cockpit. His face said everything. He walked directly to Victor Sterling and spoke in a low voice that Marcus could still hear. "Sir, the captain has reviewed the situation. Mr. Washington has a confirmed booking. We cannot compel him to move. I apologize for the inconvenience, but I'll need to seat you in 16D. It's also business class. Aisle seat." Victor Sterling stared at him. "You're joking." "I'm not, sir." The moment stretched. Sterling grabbed his bag from the overhead bin with more force than necessary. He looked at Marcus one last time. There was something in his eyes. Not defeat exactly, but the specific resentment of a man who just lost a fight he thought was already over. He walked 2 rows back and dropped into 16D without another word. Maureen Caldwell passed by Marcus's row without looking at him. Vincent Harlow gave him a brief nod, almost imperceptible, before returning to his station near the galley. Marcus exhaled. His hands were shaking now, not from fear, from the adrenaline dump of standing his ground in a room full of people who expected him to fold. He leaned back against the headrest and closed his eyes. He'd won the seat, but the flight was far from over. Because as the aircraft began its taxi toward the runway, Marcus Washington's attention shifted from the cabin to the window. And what he saw there, faint, almost invisible in the glow of the runway lights, was about to change everything. A thin, dark line running along the underside of the left wing. Liquid, moving slowly, catching the light. Marcus sat up straight. The exhaustion vanished again. He pressed his face to the glass and looked closer. His blood went cold. It wasn't water. Marcus's fingers gripped the armrest so hard his knuckles turned white. He blinked, looked again, told himself it was water. Condensation from the air conditioning system. A trick of the runway lights bouncing off wet tarmac. But it wasn't. The liquid was dark, not the clear shimmer of water catching light. This was something heavier, something with color. A reddish amber tone that spread in a slow, deliberate trail along the underside of the wing, creeping toward the trailing edge like a wound that hadn't been noticed yet. Marcus knew that color. He knew it the way a man knows the tools of his trade, the way muscle memory outlasts conscious thought. 22 years working in industrial electrical systems. 14 of those years spent inside manufacturing plants, where hydraulic presses, actuator lines, and pressurized systems were as common as coffee machines. He'd seen hydraulic fluid leak 100 times. He'd seen what happened when people ignored it. Once, at the plant in Dayton, a press operator had reported a slow drip in a hydraulic line. The shift supervisor told him to flag it for the morning crew. By morning, the line had ruptured under pressure. The press arm dropped without warning. 2 men were hospitalized. 1 lost 3 fingers. Marcus never forgot that. Never forgot the color of the fluid pooling on the concrete floor. Reddish amber. Skydrol LD4. The same fluid used in commercial aircraft hydraulic systems because it was fire-resistant and could handle extreme temperatures. Just like this. He pressed the call button above his seat. Nothing happened. He pressed it again, held it. 15 seconds passed. 20. The cabin crew was busy with final preparations. Overhead bins being closed, seatbelt checks underway. The aircraft was still taxiing, picking up speed as it approached the runway queue. Marcus unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up. Immediately, Maureen Caldwell appeared from the forward galley. Her expression shifted from professional calm to sharp disapproval in the span of a heartbeat. "Sir, the seatbelt sign is on. I need you to take your seat." "I need to speak to the captain." She stopped mid-stride. "Excuse me?" "There's fluid leaking from the left wing. I can see it from my window. It's not water. I need to speak to the captain right now." Maureen's eyes narrowed. She glanced toward the window, then back at Marcus. Her face carried the unmistakable expression of someone who had already categorized him. The difficult passenger from the seating dispute, the man who wouldn't move, the man who threatened lawyers. Now he was causing more trouble. Mr. Washington, I assure you, our aircraft undergoes a thorough inspection before every flight. What you're seeing is most likely condensation from the air conditioning system. It's perfectly normal. It's not condensation. Sir, please sit down. Have you looked at it? I don't need to look at it. Your ground crew missed it. Her smile disappeared entirely. The professional veneer cracked just enough to show irritation underneath. Mr. Washington, sit down. He didn't move. I've worked around hydraulic systems for over 20 years. That fluid is not water, it's not condensation. It's leaking from somewhere near the actuator housing. And if this aircraft takes off with a compromised hydraulic line, you're looking at partial or complete loss of flight control surfaces. Maureen stared at him. Her lips parted, then closed. For the first time since this conversation started, something flickered behind her eyes. Not belief exactly, but doubt, the kind of doubt that makes a person pause even when they don't want to. Stay here. Do not move from this spot. She turned and walked quickly toward the front galley. Marcus watched her lean into the intercom panel. He couldn't hear what she said, but he saw her gesturing toward the left side of the plane. He saw her shake her head. He saw her pause, listen, then nod. She came back. The doubt was gone, replaced by the certainty of someone who'd just been told exactly what to think. The captain says it's been noted and it's within normal parameters. Please return to your seat. Within normal parameters? Marcus's voice rose slightly, not shouting, but firm enough that passengers nearby turned their heads. Did he actually look at it, or did he take your word for it? Mr. Washington, did anyone walk out there and physically inspect the left wing in the last 10 minutes? She didn't answer. That's what I thought. Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time to return to your seat. If you refuse, I will be forced to involve security and you will be removed from this aircraft. Marcus almost laughed. The irony hit him like a freight train. 10 minutes ago, they wanted him to give up his seat. Now they wanted him to sit in it and be quiet. Either way, the message was the same. Stop being a problem, but he wasn't being a problem. He was trying to prevent one. He looked Maureen Caldwell in the eye. Go ahead, call security, call whoever you want. But I'm telling you right now, that leak is real. And if this plane takes off, every person on board is at risk, including you. His voice carried. He hadn't intended it to, but the acoustics of the cabin made sure of it. Heads turned, whispers started. A man in row 12 pulled out his phone and aimed it toward Marcus before a crew member waved him off. From 2 rows back, Victor Sterling's voice cut through the murmur like a blade. Oh, for God's sake, what is it now? Marcus ignored him. Victor Sterling didn't take well to being ignored. He unbuckled his seatbelt and stood, stepping into the aisle with the energy of a man who had decided he was going to end this personally. Are you serious right now? First the seat, now this. You're holding up an entire flight because you think you saw something out the window? Marcus turned to face him. I didn't think I saw something. I saw it. You're an electrician, not a pilot. Sit down and let the professionals handle it. The professionals missed it. Sterling took a step closer. His face had gone red, not from exertion, from the specific frustration of a man who thought he'd already won a fight and was now being forced back into the ring. You know what I think? I think you're still upset about the seat. I think this is your way of making a point, and I think everyone on this plane is tired of your act. Marcus felt the heat rise in his chest. He could feel the eyes of 60 business-class passengers on him, could feel the judgment, the assumptions, the quiet consensus forming. This man is the problem. But he held steady, because this wasn't about ego, wasn't about pride or the seat or Victor Sterling or being right. This was about what he saw through that window, and what he saw scared him. Mr. Sterling, I don't care what you think about me. I don't care if every person on this plane thinks I'm crazy, but I have seen hydraulic fluid leak before. I've seen what happens when it's ignored. And I'm not going to sit quietly and hope for the best while this aircraft takes off with a potential failure in the flight control system. That's not your call to make. Then whose call is it? Because the crew won't look. and the captain hasn't left the cockpit." Sterling opened his mouth, but before he could speak, Vincent Harlow appeared again. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in the last 15 minutes. Deep lines around his eyes, jaw tight. "Gentlemen, please, both of you need to take your seats immediately. We are second in line for takeoff." Marcus turned to him. "Mr. Harlow, I am asking you, not telling you, asking you to relay one thing to the captain. Tell him there is a visible fluid trail along the underside of the left wing, originating from the area near the inboard actuator housing. Tell him it is not condensation. Tell him it is consistent with Skydrol hydraulic fluid. And tell him that if he doesn't stop this aircraft and request a ground inspection, he is taking off with an uninspected anomaly on a transatlantic flight." Harlow stared at him. The color had drained from his face. He looked like a man who suddenly realized he was responsible for a decision that could end very badly no matter which way he chose. "That's all I'm asking. If I'm wrong, we lose 10 minutes. If I'm right, we save 180 lives. The cabin went silent again. That particular kind of silence that happens when everyone is listening but no one wants to be caught doing it. The woman across the aisle had stopped pretending to read. The businessman in the charcoal suit had turned completely around in his seat. Even the flight attendants near the galley had gone still. Harlow swallowed hard. His eyes moved to the window. He took 1 step, 2 steps, leaned across the empty seat beside Marcus to look out. He didn't say anything for a long time, just stared. Marcus could see his reflection in the glass, could see the exact moment comprehension hit. Then Harlow straightened up. His face had changed. The professional composure was still there, but underneath it was something raw, something that looked a lot like fear. "Stay here. Everyone stay in your seats." He moved fast, not walking, almost running toward the cockpit. He knocked twice, hard, and the door opened from inside. He disappeared through it. The cabin erupted in whispers. What did he see? Is something wrong with the plane? What's happening? Victor Sterling stood in the aisle, arms crossed, but his posture had shifted. The arrogance was still there, but it was thinner now. Underneath it, Marcus could see uncertainty. The kind of uncertainty that comes when a man starts to wonder if he might be on the wrong side of something important. Maureen Caldwell moved through the cabin with her palms up, voice steady but strained. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. There's a brief delay while the flight crew conducts a routine check. We'll be underway shortly." But it wasn't routine. Marcus could tell from the way she said it. The emphasis too heavy, the smile too tight. She was performing and she knew it. 30 seconds later, the aircraft stopped moving. The engines didn't shut down. The lights didn't change. But the plane stopped, right there on the taxiway, second in line for departure, with the runway lights stretching out ahead like a promise that had just been put on hold. Vincent Harlow came back out of the cockpit. He walked straight to Marcus. His hands were shaking slightly, just enough to be visible. "The captain is requesting a ground inspection. We're returning to the gate." Marcus exhaled, a long, slow breath that felt like it came from somewhere deeper than his lungs, from somewhere in his chest that had been wound tight for the last 15 minutes. "Thank you." Harlow nodded, but he didn't walk away immediately. He leaned in close enough that only Marcus could hear. "How did you know?" Marcus looked at him. "Because I've seen it before, and last time nobody listened." Harlow held his gaze for a moment. Then he turned and addressed the cabin, his voice carrying the forced calm of a man trying to prevent panic. "Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has decided to return to the gate for an additional safety inspection. This is purely precautionary. We ask for your patience and cooperation." The groans were immediate. A woman in row 9 threw her hands up. "You've got to be kidding me." A man behind her muttered loud enough to be heard 3 rows away. "I have a connection in London. This is going to cost me the meeting." Someone else, even louder. "This is because of that guy, isn't it? The one who wouldn't give up his seat." Marcus felt every word like a small stone hitting his back. He didn't turn around, didn't respond. He sat in 14C, hands on his knees, and watched through the window as the aircraft slowly reversed course and began the long taxi back to the gate. Victor Sterling dropped into 16D. He pulled out his phone the moment the aircraft stopped on the taxiway and jabbed at it furiously, even though they were still supposed to be in airplane mode. He didn't say anything to Marcus, didn't even look at him, but his silence was louder than anything he'd said all night. Maureen Caldwell walked past without acknowledging him. Vincent Harlow did the same. The other attendants avoided his row entirely. It was as if Marcus had become invisible, not in the way he was used to, where people looked past him because they didn't think he mattered, but in a new way, where people avoided him because they didn't know what to think. The aircraft reached the gate. The jetway connected with a dull thunk. Captain Alan Williams came on the intercom, his voice measured and careful. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Williams. We've returned to the gate to allow our ground maintenance team to inspect a concern flagged by the flight crew. We understand this is inconvenient and we appreciate your patience. We'll provide an update as soon as possible." A concern flagged by the flight crew, not by a passenger, by the flight crew. Marcus noticed the phrasing. He didn't blame them. He understood. It was easier to say the crew caught something than to admit a passenger in a worn jacket had seen what the professionals missed. The forward cabin door opened. 2 ground engineers in high-visibility vests boarded, spoke briefly with Vincent Harlow, then exited through the door and down the stairs to the tarmac. Marcus watched from his window. He could see them now. 2 figures in orange vests walking beneath the left wing with flashlights. They moved slowly, methodically. One crouched down. The other directed a light upward along the wing's underside. They stopped, both of them, at the same time. Crouching beneath the wing in a spot roughly where Marcus had seen the fluid trail begin. One of them stood up and spoke into a radio. The other pulled out a rag and touched it to the surface of the wing, then held it up to the light. Even from inside the cabin, Marcus could see the color on the rag, reddish amber. His heart pounded, not from vindication, not from relief, from the cold, simple understanding of what would have happened if no one had listened, if the crew had brushed him off completely, if Harlow hadn't leaned across and looked out that window. They would have taken off, climbed to 37,000 feet, crossed over the open Atlantic, and somewhere over that black water with nothing below them but ocean and nothing around them but night. The hydraulic pressure would have dropped. The flight control surfaces would have gone sluggish, then unresponsive. The pilots would have fought. They would have tried every procedure in the book. And it might not have been enough. 5 more minutes passed, then 10, then 20. The cabin grew restless. Passengers shifted in their seats, conversations grew louder. The energy in the plane had changed from annoyance to something else. Something quieter, something that tasted like anxiety. Because by now, everyone had noticed that the engineers were still under the wing, that more people had joined them, that the flashlights were still moving. And no one was saying it was routine anymore. Vincent Harlow came through the cabin one more time. He didn't stop at Marcus's row. He went all the way to the back, speaking to passengers in a calm, measured voice. But Marcus noticed his hands. They were clasped behind his back, and his fingers were interlocked so tightly his knuckles were pale. Maureen Caldwell stood in the forward galley with her arms folded, staring at the floor. She hadn't spoken to Marcus since the plane stopped, hadn't spoken to anyone. She just stood there, perfectly still, as if replaying the last 30 minutes in her head, and arriving at a conclusion she didn't want to reach. Marcus looked out the window one more time. A 3rd engineer had arrived. This one carried a clipboard and was crouched directly beneath the actuator housing, pointing at something and shaking his head. Then the cabin lights brightened. Captain Williams' voice came over the intercom again, but this time the tone was different. The casual authority was gone. In its place was something measured, careful, unmistakably serious. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Williams again. Our ground maintenance team has identified a mechanical concern that requires further evaluation. For the safety of everyone on board, we've made the decision to take this aircraft out of service. The flight is canceled." The cabin erupted. Voices overlapped. Hands shot up. The woman in row 9 was already on her feet. A man near the back shouted something about compensation. Victor Sterling slammed his tray table shut with a crack that echoed through the cabin. But Marcus didn't move. He sat in 14C staring out at the wing, watching the engineers work. And for the first time in 34 hours, his hands stopped shaking. The announcement hit the cabin like a shockwave, and then everything moved at once. Passengers surged out of their seats. Overhead bins popped open, bags came down, voices climbed over each other in a rising wall of frustration, confusion, and fear. A woman 3 rows ahead clutched her phone to her chest and started crying quietly. A businessman across the aisle was already dialing, already talking, already explaining to someone on the other end that no, he wasn't going to make the morning session, that the flight was canceled, that he didn't know when he'd get out. The crew tried to maintain order. Maureen Caldwell stood at the front with both palms raised, repeating the same phrase over and over like a mantra that had stopped working. "Please remain calm. Please remain in your seats. Rebooking information will be provided at the gate." Nobody was listening. Marcus sat still. His mind wasn't on the chaos around him. It was on the math, the cold, practical, unforgiving math of what this cancellation meant for his custody hearing. The flight was supposed to land at Heathrow at 6:40 in the morning. The hearing was at 10. Even with the cancellation, if the airline could get him on another flight within the next 2 or 3 hours, he might still make it. Tight, but possible. But if they couldn't, if the next available flight didn't get him to London until tomorrow afternoon, if there were no seats, no alternatives, no way across the Atlantic in time, then it was over. Rachel Morrison had been very clear about that. A default judgment. A ruling made without him in the room. Jennifer's legal team painting his absence as proof that he didn't care enough to show up. He pulled out his phone and turned it on. 3 missed calls from Rachel. 1 voicemail. He didn't listen to it. He already knew what it would say. He typed a text instead. "Flight canceled. Mechanical issue. Trying to rebook. I'll keep you posted." Her response came back in 8 seconds. "Daniel, you have to be in that courtroom. Call me the second you know your new flight." He stared at the screen. Then he put the phone in his pocket and stood up. The aisle was clogged with passengers pulling bags, arguing with crew members, trying to push toward the exit. Marcus didn't push. He waited. He let the crowd thin, and then he walked forward against the flow toward the cockpit. Vincent Harlow was standing just outside the cockpit door, speaking in a low voice to another crew member. He saw Marcus approaching and held up a hand. "Mr. Washington, I know you have questions. Everyone does. But right now, I need to get to London, tonight. Is there another flight?" Harlow's expression softened, just barely, just enough to show that somewhere underneath the uniform and the protocol there was a human being who understood what was at stake. "The rebooking desk at the gate will have options. That's the fastest way to—" "Mr. Harlow, you know what happened here tonight. You know what I did. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking you, one person to another, to help me find a way to get on a plane to London before morning." Harlow looked at him for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out a card, and wrote something on the back. "Go to the rebooking counter, ask for a supervisor named Janet Reese. Give her this. Tell her I sent you." Marcus took the card. "Thank you." Harlow's voice caught him as he turned. "Mr. Washington, what you did tonight, I want you to know. I'm sorry we didn't listen sooner." Marcus nodded once. Then he walked off the plane. The gate area was already a disaster. 190 passengers, all of them displaced, all of them angry, all of them competing for a limited number of seats on a limited number of flights. The rebooking counter had a line that stretched halfway down the terminal. Families sat on the floor with sleeping children draped across their laps. Business travelers paced back and forth, phones pressed to their ears, voices sharp with urgency. Marcus walked past the line, found the supervisor desk off to the side, behind a partition. A woman with short gray hair and reading glasses was typing rapidly on a computer. Her name tag read Janet Reese. "Excuse me, Vincent Harlow asked me to speak with you." He held out the card. She took it, read the back, and looked up at him over her glasses. "You're the passenger who flagged the hydraulic issue." "Yes, ma'am." She studied him for a moment. Then she turned back to her screen and started typing. Her fingers moved fast, decisive. "The next direct flight to Heathrow departs at 11:50 tonight. It's full, completely full. Economy, premium, business, all of it." She kept typing. "There's a connecting flight through Amsterdam that departs at 12:15, gets you into Heathrow at 9:40 local time." Marcus did the math. 9:40, the hearing was at 10. Heathrow to central London was at least 45 minutes on the express. That left him negative minutes. It was impossible. "Is there anything earlier?" "Let me check the partner airlines." She typed for another 30 seconds. Her face was unreadable. Then she stopped, looked at the screen, looked at Marcus. "There's a flight on a partner carrier departing at 10:30 tonight. Arrives Heathrow at 6:10 in the morning. But it's economy only and there's one seat left. I'll take it. The fare difference from your original business class ticket would result in a refund. But the rebooking fee, I don't care about the fee. I don't care about the refund. Just put me on that plane." Janet Reese looked at him again. Something in her expression shifted. It was the look of someone who had spent 20 years behind an airline counter and had learned to tell the difference between a passenger who was angry about inconvenience and a passenger who was fighting for something that actually mattered. "Give me 2 minutes." She picked up a phone, spoke quietly, typed some more, spoke again, then hung up. She printed a boarding pass and slid it across the counter. "Gate C22. Boarding starts in 40 minutes. You'll need to move quickly." Marcus took the boarding pass. His hand was trembling. Not from fear or exhaustion this time. From relief so sharp it almost hurt. Thank you so much." "Go." And then, just as he turned, she added, "Mr. Washington, my daughter went through a custody battle 3 years ago. Her ex tried to take her kids to another state. She fought like hell, and she won." Janet paused. Her eyes were clear, direct. "You fight like hell too?" He couldn't speak. He nodded, pressed his lips together, and walked away fast before the emotion cracked through. He moved through the terminal at a half-jog, weaving between travelers and luggage carts and slow-moving families. Gate C22 was on the other side of the airport. He had 40 minutes. He could make it. His phone buzzed. "Rachel. Got a flight, landing at 6:10. I'll be at your office by 8. Thank God, I'll have everything ready. Daniel, listen to me. Get some sleep on that plane. You need to be sharp tomorrow." "I will." He wouldn't. He knew that, but he said it anyway. He was halfway to gate C22, cutting through the food court, when a voice stopped him. "Mr. Washington." He turned. Victor Sterling was standing near a coffee kiosk, leather bag slung over one shoulder, phone in hand. He looked different than he had on the plane. The blazer was rumpled, the silver hair slightly out of place. The confidence that had radiated off him like heat was muted now, replaced by something Marcus couldn't quite identify. Marcus stopped walking. Every instinct told him to keep moving. He didn't have time for this. He didn't owe this man anything. But something in Sterling's face made him pause. "I heard what they found. The hydraulic line." Marcus said nothing. "They said it was a significant leak. Said if the plane had taken off, there was a real chance of a control failure over the Atlantic. That's what I was trying to tell you. Sterling's jaw tightened. He looked away, then back. I know. Silence stretched between them. Around them, the terminal hummed with the chaos of displaced passengers and delayed flights. But in that small pocket of space near the coffee kiosk, it was just two men standing 3 feet apart, dealing with the weight of what had almost happened. I owe you an apology. On the plane, the things I said, the way I handled that. Sterling paused. He seemed to be choosing his words carefully, like a man who wasn't used to apologizing and was building the sentence one piece at a time. I was wrong. I was out of line, and I'm sorry. Marcus studied him, searched for the angle, the calculation, the strategic move, because men like Victor Sterling didn't apologize without reason. Men like Sterling always had a play, but he didn't see one. What he saw was a man standing in an airport terminal at 10 o'clock at night, looking genuinely shaken, genuinely humbled, and genuinely struggling with the realization that his own arrogance had nearly prevented someone from saving his life. You could have taken the deal, you could have moved to economy, you could have given up that seat and ended up somewhere else on the plane, where you wouldn't have been near that window, where you wouldn't have seen the leak. Sterling's voice dropped. I know, and I tried to make that happen. I pushed for it. I pushed hard. He ran a hand through his hair. The polish was completely gone now. What was left looked raw. If you had moved, nobody would have seen it, would they? Marcus didn't answer. He didn't have to. I've been sitting here for the last 20 minutes thinking about that. Thinking about what would have happened, about my wife, my kids, about the fact that I was more concerned about getting a window seat than listening to a man who was trying to keep us alive. He stopped, swallowed. His composure cracked just for a second, just enough for Marcus to see the fear underneath, the real, genuine, bone-deep fear of a man who had looked back at a near miss and realized how close he'd come. I've got 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl. 13, 11, and 8. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. I've got one. A girl, she's 9. The custody hearing? Yeah. Is that where you're heading now? Marcus held up the boarding pass. New flight, different airline. I'll make it. Sterling nodded. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. Held it out. Marcus looked at it but didn't take it. I'm not looking for... I know you're not. That's not what this is. I just want you to have my contact information, in case you ever need anything, legal support, a reference, whatever, no strings, I mean that. Marcus looked at the card, then at Sterling. Then he took it and put it in his pocket. Thank you. Don't thank me. I don't deserve it. Sterling paused. His voice had gone quiet. Washington, I've built a career on reading people, on sizing them up in 30 seconds and deciding what they're worth. And tonight I looked at you and decided you were nobody. I decided you didn't belong. I decided you were less important than me because of what you were wearing and where you work and how tired you looked. He stopped again. The words seemed to catch in his throat. And you turned out to be the most important person on that plane. Marcus felt the words land somewhere deep. Not like a compliment, like a truth that had been waiting to be spoken out loud. He didn't know what to say, so he said the only thing that felt honest. I was just the guy who looked out the window. No, you were the guy who refused to stop looking even when everyone told you to sit down and shut up. That's different. That's the part most people don't have. They stood there for another moment. 2 men from different worlds, separated by money and status and every assumption the world uses to sort people into categories. And for just that moment, none of it mattered. I've got to go. My gate's on the other side of the terminal. Sterling extended his hand. Marcus shook it, firm, brief, the way men shake hands when something real is passed between them and words aren't enough to carry it. Good luck tomorrow with the hearing. Thanks. Marcus turned and walked fast. He didn't look back. The terminal was thinning out now. The rush of displaced passengers had spread across the airport, absorbed into other gates, other flights, other plans hastily remade. Marcus's footsteps echoed on the polished floor as he moved through the corridors, past darkened storefronts and empty seating areas. His body was screaming. 36 hours without sleep. His legs felt heavy. His eyes burned. The adrenaline that had carried him through the confrontation on the plane, the inspection, the rebooking, was fading now, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness that settled into him like cold water. But he kept walking, because Zoe was waiting, not literally. She didn't know any of this was happening. She was at home with Marcus's mother, probably asleep, probably curled up with the stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 3. She didn't know that her father was in an airport 3,000 miles away, running on fumes and fear and a love so fierce it had kept him upright for 36 hours straight. She didn't know, but she was the reason he kept moving. He reached gate C-22 with 12 minutes to spare. The boarding area was half full. A different airline, a different crew, a different plane. He checked the wing instinctively, scanning from inside the terminal. Old habit now, or maybe new habit, hard to tell. He found a seat near the window and sat down. His legs thanked him. His back thanked him. His eyes tried to close on their own. His phone buzzed, a text from a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Washington, this is Vincent Harlow. Janet Reese gave me your number. I hope that's okay. I wanted you to know that the maintenance report came back. The leak was in the primary hydraulic actuator for the left aileron. Significant fluid loss. The engineering team classified it as a high-risk failure point. Their assessment is that if the aircraft had reached cruising altitude, there was a strong probability of partial loss of lateral control." Marcus read it twice. Partial loss of lateral control. Over the Atlantic. At night. With 180 people on board. Another text followed. "The captain asked me to personally thank you. The airline will be reaching out formally, but he wanted you to know that in his professional opinion, your observation tonight prevented a potential catastrophic event. His words, not mine." Marcus stared at the screen. He tried to process it, tried to feel something appropriate, relief, pride, vindication, something. But all he felt was tired and grateful and overwhelmed by the randomness of it all. The fact that he'd bought a business-class ticket because it was the only flight that got him to London in time. The fact that they tried to move him. The fact that he'd refused. The fact that his seat happened to be next to a window that looked directly at the section of wing where the leak was visible. The fact that he happened to know what hydraulic fluid looked like because of 22 years in industrial plants. A chain of small decisions and stubborn refusals that had, by pure chance or something more, put the right eyes in the right place at the right time. He typed back, "Thank you for listening to me, Mr. Harlow. That's the part that mattered." Then he put his phone away. Boarding was called. Marcus stood, grabbed his bag, and joined the line. Economy seat, middle row. It didn't matter. Nothing about the seat mattered. All that mattered was that the plane would take off, cross the ocean, and land at Heathrow at 6:10 in the morning. He'd be in Rachel's office by 8, in the courtroom by 10, and when the judge asked whether Marcus Washington was the kind of father who showed up, who fought, who put his daughter first above everything else, the answer would be sitting right there in that courtroom, tired, unshaven, running on coffee and willpower, but present, always present. He handed his boarding pass to the gate agent, walked down the jetway, and found his seat. Middle row, economy, between a teenager with headphones and an elderly woman reading a paperback novel. He sat down, buckled in, leaned his head back. And for the first time in 36 hours, Marcus Washington closed his eyes. Not to sleep, not yet. Just to hold still for one moment and let the truth of the night settle over him. The seat they tried to take, the leak no one else saw, the plane that never should have left the ground. The apology from a man who'd never given one before. And somewhere 3,000 miles ahead of him, a courtroom where a judge would decide the rest of his life. His breathing slowed, his shoulders dropped. The engine spooled up outside and the aircraft began to move. Marcus kept his eyes closed and let the motion carry him forward. The plane touched down at Heathrow at 6:14 in the morning, 4 minutes behind schedule. Marcus felt the wheels hit the tarmac and his eyes snapped open like a switch had been thrown. He hadn't slept. Not really. He drifted in and out of something that wasn't quite sleep and wasn't quite consciousness. A gray half-state where his mind kept replaying the same images on a loop. The fluid under the wing, Sterling's face, Maureen Caldwell's tight smile, Harlow leaning across the empty seat to look out the window, and Zoe, always Zoe. Her face woven through every other thought like a thread holding the rest together. He was moving before the seatbelt sign went off. The elderly woman beside him looked up from her paperback and gave him a small, knowing smile. The kind older women give to younger men who look like they're carrying something heavy. He nodded at her and pulled his bag from under the seat. The moment the cabin doors opened, he was in the jetway, walking fast, then faster, then running. He cleared customs in 22 minutes. A small miracle. The officer looked at his passport, looked at his face, and waved him through without a single question. Maybe he looked too exhausted to be suspicious. Maybe he looked like exactly what he was. A father with somewhere urgent to be. He hit the Heathrow Express platform at 6:51. The train left at 6:55. He dropped into a seat, pulled out his phone, and called Rachel Morrison. She picked up on the first ring. "Tell me you're on the ground." "I'm on the ground. Heathrow Express. I'll be at Paddington by 7:15. "Thank God. Okay, listen. I need you at my office by 8, no later. We have to go through the final documents, and there's something new." Marcus's stomach dropped. What kind of new? Jennifer's lawyers filed a supplemental motion yesterday afternoon. They're arguing that your work schedule demonstrates an inability to provide consistent daily care. They've submitted your overtime records from the last 6 months. Marcus closed his eyes. His overtime records. The same overtime he'd worked to pay for the lawyer. The ticket. The fight to keep his daughter. They were using it against him. How bad is it? It's not great, but it's not fatal. I've prepared a counter-argument. The overtime was temporary and directly tied to funding this legal process. It actually demonstrates commitment, not neglect. But I need you sharp, Marcus. I need you calm and articulate in that courtroom. Can you do that? I haven't slept in almost 40 hours. I know, I can hear it in your voice. There's a shower at my office. Fresh coffee. I'll have everything laid out. You walk in, clean up. We prep for 90 minutes and we walk into that courtroom ready, okay? Okay? Marcus, yeah? You made it. You're here. That already matters more than you know. He hung up and stared out the window as London blurred past. Green fields giving way to brick and concrete and glass. A city waking up around him while he ran on fumes and adrenaline and something deeper than either. He thought about what Rachel had said. Jennifer's lawyers had pulled his overtime records. 6 months of 14-hour shifts, 6 months of missed dinners and early mornings and weekends spent at the plant instead of at home. They'd taken the evidence of his sacrifice and reframed it as evidence of his failure. That was the cruelty of it, not the legal strategy, the framing, the way the same set of facts could tell 2 completely different stories depending on who was telling them. In one story, Marcus Washington was a father who worked himself to the bone to fight for his daughter. In the other, he was an absent parent who prioritized his job over his child. Same man, same hours, same calloused hands and tired eyes. 2 opposite conclusions. He knew which story Jennifer's lawyers would tell. He knew how it would sound in a courtroom. He knew that a judge who didn't know him, who had never seen him make Zoe's lunch at 5 in the morning or braid her hair before school or sit on the edge of her bed reading stories until she fell asleep, would have to decide which version of Marcus Washington was real based on paperwork and arguments and the performance of two legal teams. It terrified him. The train pulled into Paddington at 7:18. Marcus was off the platform and into a cab within 2 minutes. He gave the driver Rachel's office address and leaned back, willing the London traffic to cooperate for once in its existence. It didn't, but he made it to her office at 7:52. 8 minutes early. Rachel Morrison was already at her desk. She was a small woman in her early 50s with sharp eyes and a habit of speaking in clipped, precise sentences that wasted nothing. She'd been practicing family law for 23 years. Marcus's case wasn't her biggest. It wasn't her most complicated, but she'd told him once over coffee during their second meeting that it was the one she cared about most. "You look terrible." "Thank you." "Shower's down the hall. There's a clean shirt in the closet. I guessed your size. If it doesn't fit, we'll make it work." He showered in 4 minutes. The hot water hit his skin and something inside him loosened just slightly. Not the tension. The tension was permanent now, baked into his muscles and his jaw and the space between his shoulders. But the fog in his head cleared a little. Enough to think. Enough to focus. The shirt fit close enough. He came back into Rachel's office looking less like a man who'd been awake for 40 hours and more like a man who'd been awake for 20. It was an improvement. Rachel pushed a cup of coffee across the desk and opened a folder. "Okay, here's where we stand. Jennifer's team is going to argue 3 things. 1, your work schedule is incompatible with primary custody. 2, her relocation to the UK provides Zoe with better educational opportunities and family support. 3, your financial situation is unstable. My financial situation is unstable because I spent everything I had on this case. I know, and that's exactly what I'm going to tell the judge. But I need you to say it too, in your own words, without anger, without bitterness. The judge needs to hear from you directly why you're here and what you've sacrificed to be here." "What do you want me to say?" Rachel leaned forward. "I want you to tell the truth, simply, clearly. I want you to tell the judge who Zoe is to you, not in abstractions, not in legal language. Tell the judge about Sunday mornings. Tell the judge about the drawings on the refrigerator. Tell the judge about reading chapter books at night. Tell the judge what your life looks like with your daughter in it, and what it would look like without her." Marcus's throat tightened. "I'm not good at that, talking about my feelings in front of strangers." "I know you're not, but today you have to be, because Jennifer's lawyers are polished and prepared, and they're going to paint a very convincing picture of a mother who can provide a stable, affluent home in a country with excellent schools and extended family support. And the only thing that can compete with that picture is the truth about who you are as a father. Not on paper. In person." He nodded. He drank the coffee. He listened while Rachel walked him through the documents, the timeline, the counter-arguments, the likely questions from the judge. She was thorough, relentless, and by 9:30 Marcus felt something that almost resembled preparedness. Not confidence. He was too tired and too honest with himself for confidence. But preparedness, a readiness to walk into that room and say what needed to be said. They took a cab to the courthouse. Neither of them spoke during the ride. Rachel reviewed notes on her phone. Marcus watched London pass by outside the window and thought about the last time he'd seen Zoe. 3 days ago, a Tuesday. He'd dropped her at school, same as always. She'd unbuckled her seatbelt, grabbed her backpack, and then stopped with her hand on the door handle. "Dad, are you going somewhere?" He'd hesitated. He didn't want to lie to her, but he didn't want to scare her either. She knew about the custody situation. Kids always know more than adults think. But he tried to shield her from the worst of it. "I have to take a trip for a couple days. Grandma's going to stay with you." Is it about me? His heart had cracked right there in the school drop-off lane, with other cars honking behind him. It's about making sure we stay together, baby, that's all. She'd looked at him with those eyes, those huge, serious 9-year-old eyes that saw everything. You'll come back? Always. She'd nodded, climbed out of the truck, walked into school without looking back. Not because she didn't care, because she trusted him, because she believed him when he said always. And now he was here, 3,000 miles and 40 hours later, sitting in a cab in London, about to walk into a courtroom and fight for the right to keep that promise. They arrived at the courthouse at 9:45. Rachel led him through security through a maze of corridors into a waiting area outside courtroom 4. Jennifer was already there. She sat on a bench across the hall with her lawyer, a tall man in an impeccable gray suit named Jeffrey Hale. Jennifer looked different than Marcus remembered. Her hair was shorter. She was thinner. She wore a navy dress and heels and a pearl necklace that Marcus had never seen before. She looked composed, polished, ready. She glanced up when Marcus walked in. Their eyes met for exactly 1 second, then she looked away. There had been a time when that face was the center of his world. When he'd loved her so completely that the idea of sitting across a courtroom from her would have seemed like a bad dream. But that was before the arguments that never resolved, before the silence that replaced the fighting. Before she told him one Tuesday evening while Zoe was in the bathtub singing to herself that she was leaving, that she'd been offered a position in London, that she wanted to take Zoe with her. He'd said no. She'd filed, and here they were. Jeffrey Hale leaned over and whispered something to Jennifer. She nodded without expression. Rachel touched Marcus's arm. Don't look at her, don't engage. Focus on me and focus on the judge, that's it. I know. Marcus, I mean it. Whatever they say in there, whatever they claim about you, you stay calm. You do not react, you wait for your turn and then you speak, understood? Understood. The courtroom doors opened at 10 sharp. They filed in, Marcus on one side, Jennifer on the other. Two people who had once shared a bed, a home, a child, a life. Now separated by a wooden table and a gulf of legal paperwork. The judge was a woman, late 60s, silver hair, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. Her name was Justice Eleanor Hargrove, and she had a reputation, according to Rachel, for being thorough, fair, and deeply skeptical of parents who use children as leverage. Good morning. This is the matter of Reed versus Washington regarding the custody and residential arrangements for the minor child, Zoe Ann Washington, age 9. I've reviewed the submissions from both parties. We'll begin with the petitioner. Jeffrey Hale stood. He was good. Marcus could see that immediately. His voice was measured, his arguments clean, his delivery smooth. He painted a picture of Jennifer as a devoted mother who had secured a prestigious research position at a London university, who had extended family in the area, who could provide Zoe with access to excellent schools, cultural enrichment, and a stable 2-parent home because Jennifer had remarried. A man named James, a radiologist. Marcus had never met him. Hale spoke for 20 minutes. He referenced studies on child development. He cited the educational rankings of the schools Jennifer had identified. He presented letters of support from Jennifer's colleagues, her new husband's family, and a child psychologist who had evaluated Zoe and concluded that she was adaptable and resilient. Adaptable and resilient, as if those were arguments for moving a child away from her father rather than descriptions of how she'd survived the divorce. Then Hale turned to Marcus. Your Honor, while we respect Mr. Washington's love for his daughter, the evidence shows a pattern of extended work hours that leaves Zoe in the care of her paternal grandmother for significant portions of the day. Mr. Washington's financial records indicate ongoing instability. His current living situation, a 2-bedroom rental, provides limited space, and his inability to offer the educational and social advantages available in London suggests truth that the child's best interests are served by granting primary custody to her mother. Marcus's jaw tightened. He felt Rachel's hand on his arm, steady, a reminder. Then it was Rachel's turn. She stood and she was everything Jeffrey Hale was not. Where he was polished, she was direct. Where he was smooth, she was sharp. She didn't paint a picture, she built a case, brick by brick. With facts that hit like hammer blows, she presented Marcus's complete work history, not just the overtime, the full picture. A man who had been employed continuously for 14 years, who had never missed a child support payment, who had adjusted his schedule after the separation to be home every morning for school drop-off and every evening for dinner, who had taken Zoe to every doctor's appointment, every school conference, every dance recital. She presented text messages between Marcus and Zoe's teachers showing his active involvement in her education. She presented a letter from Zoe's school counselor describing Marcus as exceptionally engaged and attentive. She presented financial records showing that Marcus's overtime was temporary and specifically tied to funding the custody process. Your Honor, Mr. Washington is not a perfect man. He's not wealthy. He doesn't have a prestigious position or a large house or family connections in London. What he has is a relationship with his daughter that is the foundation of her emotional world. Zoe Washington is not adaptable and resilient because she doesn't need her father. She is adaptable and resilient because her father has given her the security to be those things. Marcus felt something break loose inside him. Not sadness. Something bigger than sadness, something that had been compressed for months under the weight of lawyers and paperwork and fear, and was now expanding in his chest like a breath he'd been holding for a very long time. Then Justice Hargrove looked at him. Mr. Washington, I'd like to hear from you directly. In your own words, tell me why you believe your daughter should remain in your primary custody. Rachel gave him a small nod. Marcus stood. His legs felt unsteady. His hands gripped the edge of the table. He looked at the judge, and for a moment his mind went completely blank. Every rehearsed line, every careful phrase Rachel had coached him on, vanished, so he didn't use them. He just talked. Your Honor, I'm not going to tell you I'm the best father in the world. I'm not. I burn the pancakes most Sundays. I forget to sign permission slips. I once sent Zoe to school with 2 different shoes because I was running late and didn't notice. A small sound from somewhere in the courtroom. Almost a laugh. Almost. But I'm there. Every morning. I'm there every night. I'm there when she's sick. I'm the one sitting on the bathroom floor with her at 2 in the morning when she can't breathe because her asthma's acting up. When she had nightmares after the divorce, I'm the one who moved a sleeping bag into her room and slept on the floor for 3 weeks until she felt safe again. His voice cracked. He paused, swallowed, kept going. I took a flight yesterday from New York to be here today. The plane had a mechanical failure, a hydraulic leak that I identified because I've worked around those systems for 22 years. The flight was canceled. I got on another plane, a different airline. Economy seat, middle row. I haven't slept in almost 2 days. I haven't eaten a proper meal since Tuesday. And I would do all of it again, 10 times over, without hesitation, because my daughter needs to know that her father will always show up, no matter what. He looked at Jennifer. She was staring at the table in front of her, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't look up. Jennifer is a good mother. I've never said otherwise. Zoe loves her and she should, but Zoe's home is with me. Not because I'm better, not because I have more to offer on paper, but because I'm the one she calls when she's scared. I'm the one she reads to at night. I'm the one she drew on that picture on the refrigerator. He stopped. His throat was tight. His eyes were burning. She drew 2 stick figures holding hands. One tall, one small, and underneath in purple crayon she wrote, "Me and Dad forever." That's not a legal argument. I know that. But it's the truth, and it's the only thing I have that no document, no study, no financial report can capture. He sat down. The courtroom was quiet. Justice Hargrove removed her glasses and set them on the bench. She looked at Marcus for a long time. Then she looked at Jennifer, then at both lawyers. "I'm going to recess for 30 minutes. When we reconvene, I'll have questions for both parties, and then I'll make my decision." She stood. The courtroom rose with her, and then she was gone through a door behind the bench, and the room exhaled. Rachel leaned over. "You did good, Marcus." He couldn't respond. His hands were shaking. His eyes were wet. He pressed his palms flat against the table and focused on breathing. 30 minutes. In 30 minutes, a woman he'd never met before today would decide whether his daughter stayed with him or moved across an ocean. He closed his eyes and saw Zoe's face the way she'd looked at him in the truck 3 days ago. Those serious eyes, that quiet trust. "You'll come back, always." He opened his eyes and waited. The 30 minutes felt like 30 hours. Marcus sat at the table with his hands flat on the wood, staring at a knot in the grain directly in front of him. Rachel sat beside him, reviewing notes, jotting things in the margin of her legal pad, occasionally touching his arm to remind him she was there. Across the aisle, Jennifer sat with Jeffrey Hale. They were whispering. Marcus didn't try to hear what they were saying. He didn't want to know. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, a text from his mother. "Zoe asked about you this morning. I told her you were taking care of something important. She said to tell you she made you a new drawing. She wouldn't show me what it is. Said it's a surprise for when you get home." Marcus read it 3 times. Then he put the phone away and pressed his hand against his chest over his heart, the way he'd done on the plane, a reflex now, a way of holding himself together when the seams were threatening to come apart. The bailiff appeared at the door. "Court is reconvening. All parties, please take your seats." Marcus stood. His legs felt hollow. Rachel gathered her papers, straightened her jacket, and gave him one look. Not reassuring, not optimistic, just steady. The look of a woman who had done this hundreds of times, and who understood that the next 20 minutes would either be the best or worst of Marcus Washington's life, and that there was nothing more she could do about it. They sat. Justice Hargrove entered from the door behind the bench. The courtroom rose, then settled as she took her seat. She placed a single sheet of paper in front of her, put her glasses on, and looked out at both tables. "Before I issue my ruling, I have a few questions. Mr. Hale, you've presented Miss Reed's relocation as offering superior educational and social opportunities for the child. Can you speak to the transition plan? Specifically, how would Zoe's relationship with her father be maintained if primary custody is transferred to her mother in London?" Jeffrey Hale stood. "Your Honor, Ms. Reed is fully committed to facilitating a strong relationship between Zoe and her father. We're proposing regular video calls, holiday visitation periods, and extended summer stays in the United States. Mr. Washington would have full access during those periods." Holiday visitation and summer stays. Justice Hargrove repeated the words without inflection, but something in the way she said them made the room feel colder. "So the proposal is that a 9-year-old girl who currently sees her father every day would transition to seeing him during school breaks and over a video screen. With respect, Your Honor, the quality of the time is more important than— I'm aware of the arguments around quality versus quantity, Mr. Hale. Thank you." She turned to Marcus's side. "Ms. Morrison, Mr. Washington testified that he works extended hours. If custody remains with him, what is the daily care arrangement for Zoe during his working hours?" Rachel stood. "Zoe is in school from 8 to 3. Mr. Washington's mother, Margaret Washington, provides after-school care until Marcus returns from work, typically by 5:30. On the occasions when overtime is required, Margaret stays later. Zoe has been in this arrangement for the past 2 years and has thrived in it. Her school reports, which are included in our submission, show strong academic performance and positive social development." "And the overtime, is that ongoing?" No, Your Honor, the overtime was specific to funding this legal process. Mr. Washington's supervisor has confirmed in writing that his standard schedule is 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and that flexible arrangements are available when needed. Justice Hargrove nodded slowly. She made a note. Then she looked at Jennifer. Ms. Reed, I'd like to hear from you. Jennifer stood. She was composed. Her hands were still. Her voice was clear. But Marcus could see something in the way she held her shoulders. A tightness, a guardedness that told him she was more nervous than she appeared. Your Honor, I love my daughter. Everything I've done, the move, the new position, the life I've built here, it's all been with her best interests in mind. I believe London offers her opportunities she simply won't have in Ohio. Better schools, cultural exposure, a broader worldview, and my husband James is a wonderful man who cares for Zoe deeply. How long has Zoe known your husband? They've met several times over the past year, video calls, holiday visits when Zoe came to stay with me. So they've met several times over a year. Justice Hargrove paused. Ms. Reed, I want to ask you something directly. In your petition, you describe Mr. Washington as a loving but limited father. Can you explain what you mean by limited? Jennifer hesitated. For the first time, her composure flickered. I meant that Marcus's resources are limited, his ability to provide certain opportunities. I understand the financial argument. I've read it thoroughly. I'm asking about something else. In your view, is Marcus Washington a good father? The courtroom went very quiet. Jennifer looked at the table, then at her lawyer, then for the first time since the proceedings began, at Marcus. Their eyes met, and in that moment something passed between them that had nothing to do with lawyers or legal strategy or courtroom theater. It was older than all of that. It was the residue of a marriage that had failed but had produced one thing of infinite value, and they both knew it. Yes, Marcus is a good father. Her voice was quiet but clear. Then help me understand why you believe it serves Zoe's best interest to reduce her daily contact with a father you acknowledge is good in favor of opportunities that, while valuable, can be supplemented in other ways. Jeffrey Hale started to stand. Your Honor, if I may— You may not, Mr. Hale. I'm speaking to Miss Reed. Jennifer's mouth opened, then closed. She looked down at her hands. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. I want what's best for her. That's all I've ever wanted. I believe you. I believe both of you want what's best for your daughter. That's what makes this case difficult. This isn't a case of neglect or abuse or parental unfitness. This is a case of two people who love the same child and disagree about where she should grow up. Justice Hargrove paused and removed her glasses. I've been doing this for a long time. And in my experience, the most important factor in a child's well-being is not the size of the house or the ranking of the school or the number of extracurricular activities available within a 10-mile radius. The most important factor is the consistency and presence of the people who love them. Marcus stopped breathing. Mr. Washington flew across an ocean to be in this courtroom. His plane was grounded due to a mechanical failure that he identified, potentially saving 180 lives. He found another flight on another airline in economy class, and he arrived this morning with less than 3 hours of sleep because he understood that being here was not optional. That showing up was not optional. She looked at Marcus. That tells me something that no financial statement or school ranking can tell me. It tells me that this is a father who will not quit, who will not be absent, who will do whatever it takes, however hard it is, however exhausted he is, to be there for his child. Marcus's vision blurred. He blinked rapidly and gripped the edge of the table. It is the ruling of this court that primary custody of Zoe Ann Washington shall remain with her father, Marcus Washington, in the state of Ohio. The words hit him like a wave, not a crash. A wave. The kind that lifts you off your feet and holds you suspended for a moment before setting you gently back down. Rachel exhaled beside him. a sharp, controlled breath that she'd been holding for longer than she would ever admit. Ms. Reed will retain generous visitation rights, including school holidays, alternating major holidays, and an extended period during summer break. The court encourages both parties to work cooperatively to ensure Zoe maintains a strong relationship with her mother. The specifics of the visitation schedule will be finalized within 30 days. Justice Hargrove put her glasses back on and looked at both tables. I want to say one more thing, and I'm saying it to both of you. This child did not choose any of this. She didn't choose the divorce. She didn't choose the relocation. She didn't choose to be the subject of a legal proceeding. What she deserves from both of you is the assurance that she is loved fully and unconditionally by two parents who are capable of putting her needs above their own. I trust that you will both honor that. She gathered her papers. Court is adjourned. The room stood as Justice Hargrove exited, and then it was over. Marcus didn't move. He sat at the table, both hands gripping the wood, his shoulders shaking. Not sobbing, not breaking down, just trembling. The kind of trembling that happens when a body that has been running on fear and adrenaline for 2 straight days finally receives the news it was terrified it would never hear. Rachel put her hand on his back. "You did it, Marcus." He couldn't speak. He shook his head, then nodded, then shook his head again. And somewhere between the two gestures, a single tear rolled down his cheek and landed on the table. "I need to call my mom." "Go, I'll handle the paperwork." He stood, pushed through the courtroom doors, walked into the hallway. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the phone. He leaned against the wall and dialed. His mother answered on the second ring. "Marcus?" "Mom." One word, that was all he could manage, but she heard everything in it. "Oh, sweetheart, you got her?" "I got her, Mom. She's staying with me." The sound his mother made was something between a laugh and a cry, a sound that contained 63 years of living and loving and worrying about her son and her granddaughter and every terrible thing that could have happened but didn't. "Oh, thank God! Oh, Marcus, thank God! Can you put her on? Is she there?" "She's right here. She just got home from school. Hold on." A rustling, footsteps, the sound of a phone being passed from one hand to another. "Dad?" Zoe's voice hit him like sunlight, like oxygen, like the first warm day after a winter that had lasted too long. "Hey, baby." "Grandma's crying." "Why is Grandma crying?" He laughed. It came out wet and ragged and completely involuntary. "She's happy, Zoe. She's crying because she's happy." "That's weird." "Yeah, it is." "Dad, when are you coming home?" "Tomorrow. I'm catching a flight tonight and I'll be home tomorrow morning." "Will you be here when I wake up?" "I will be there when you wake up. I promise." "Okay." "Dad?" "Yeah?" "I made you a new drawing. It's better than the last one. There's a dog in this one." He pressed his hand over his eyes. "We don't have a dog, Zoe." "I know, but maybe we should get one. I drew it already, so it's basically decided." He laughed again, harder this time. The kind of laugh that comes from the very bottom of a place that has been dark for a very long time and is suddenly, unexpectedly full of light. "We'll talk about it when I get home." "That means yes, Grandma," he said, "yes." He could hear his mother in the background, still crying, still laughing, telling Zoe that's not what he said, while Zoe insisted that it absolutely was. He leaned against the wall and let the sound of them wash over him. His mother, his daughter, the two people who made up the entire architecture of his life, still there, still together, still his. He hung up eventually. He didn't remember saying goodbye. The conversation just ended the way conversations with Zoe always ended. Abruptly, cheerfully, in the middle of a sentence about something unrelated. She'd been telling him about a caterpillar she found at recess. He smiled at the phone for a long time after the screen went dark. He was still standing in the hallway when Jennifer came through the courtroom doors. She stopped when she saw him. They were 10 feet apart. Her lawyer was behind her, already on his phone, already moving on to the next case. But Jennifer stood still. Marcus looked at her. He didn't feel triumph. He didn't feel vindication. He felt the particular sadness that comes from winning something in a place where winning means someone else lost. And the someone else was a woman he'd once loved, who was standing in a courthouse hallway in London with the knowledge that her daughter would be growing up an ocean away. Jennifer. She looked at him. Her eyes were red. Her composure, the polished, controlled exterior that had held firm through the entire hearing, was gone. She looked exactly the way she'd looked the night she told him she was leaving. Exhausted, conflicted, carrying something too heavy for one person. I'm not going to fight you on the visitation. Whatever schedule the court sets, I'll make sure she's available. Every holiday, every summer. You call her whenever you want. I won't get in the way of that. Jennifer's chin trembled. Marcus, she needs her mother. I've never said otherwise, and I'm going to make sure she has her mother in her life every single day if that's what you want. Jennifer pressed her hand to her mouth. She nodded. Tears spilled down her cheeks and she didn't wipe them away. Thank you. Her voice was barely a whisper. She's our daughter, Jennifer. She's not a trophy. She's not a win. She's a kid who loves both of us and she deserves to keep doing that. Jennifer nodded again. She took a breath, straightened her shoulders, and walked past him toward the exit. She didn't look back, but as she passed, her hand brushed his arm, lightly, briefly, a touch so quick it could have been accidental. It wasn't. Marcus watched her go. Then he turned and walked the other direction. He found Rachel in the lobby packing her briefcase. She looked up and studied his face. You okay? I think so. Yeah, I think I am. Good. Go home, Marcus. Go home and be with your daughter. He took the train back to Heathrow. He booked the evening flight, economy, middle seat, 7 hours and 45 minutes. He didn't care. The seat didn't matter. It had never really mattered. What mattered was where it was taking him. He boarded the plane, found his row, and sat down. The woman next to him was reading a magazine. The man on the other side was already asleep. Marcus buckled his seatbelt and leaned his head back. His phone buzzed one final time before he switched it to airplane mode, an email from an address he didn't recognize. He opened it. Mr. Washington, my name is Captain Alan Williams. I was the captain of Flight 2249, the aircraft you identified the hydraulic failure on. I've been flying commercial aircraft for 28 years. In that entire career, I have never had a passenger identify a critical mechanical fault that was missed during pre-flight inspection. The maintenance team's final report confirms that the leak in the primary hydraulic actuator for the left aileron had progressed to a level that posed a serious risk of partial control failure at altitude. I don't use the word hero lightly, and I know you probably wouldn't accept it, but I want you to know that 180 people went home to their families because you refused to be ignored. On behalf of my crew and every soul that was on that aircraft, thank you. I hope you got where you needed to go. Marcus read it once, then again. Then he closed the email and put the phone away. He thought about all the people who had tried to make him move. Maureen Caldwell with her rehearsed smile. Victor Sterling with his blazer and his bourbon breath. The passengers who whispered. The crew who pressured. Every set of eyes that had looked at him and decided he didn't belong. And he thought about what would have happened if he'd agreed, if he'd taken the miles. Accepted the downgrade, moved to the back of the plane like a man who knew his place. Seat 14C would have been empty or occupied by someone who didn't know what hydraulic fluid looked like. The plane would have taken off, climbed to altitude, crossed the ocean, and maybe everything would have been fine. Maybe the leak was slow enough. Maybe the redundant systems would have held. Maybe the pilots would have managed. Or maybe not. He'd never know. And that was the mercy of it, the not knowing. The simple, terrible mercy of a disaster that didn't happen because one tired man in a worn jacket looked out a window and refused to stay quiet. The plane pushed back from the gate. The engines spooled up. The captain came on the intercom with the standard greeting, the weather update, the estimated flight time. Marcus closed his eyes. He was going home, to a 2-bedroom rental that needed a new water heater, to a job that started at 6 in the morning, to a refrigerator with a stick figure drawing taped to the door, to Sunday pancakes that he'd probably burn again, to a 9-year-old girl with huge, serious eyes who was expecting him to walk through the door tomorrow morning, and to a new drawing with a dog in it. He smiled. For the first time in 3 days, he smiled. He was still smiling when the plane lifted off the runway and climbed into the evening sky, heading west, heading home, carrying a man who had done the only thing he'd ever known how to do. He showed up. He paid attention. He refused to move, and he kept his promise. That was enough. That had always been enough. Because Marcus Washington was never the kind of man who changed the world with power or money or influence. He was the kind of man who changed it by being exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what needed to be done, at exactly the moment it mattered most, and the world, whether it noticed or not, was better for it.